Hey, what's up? It's Bon. This is just a quick intro to this another special episode of the EchoCast where I interviewed N7, the legend, and he's a big giant Mass Effect fan. So we went on for about an hour and a half talking about Mass Effect, the trilogy, Andromeda, and the future game that's coming. I had a ton of fun chatting with him. He was very pleasant and great to chat with about this. I can finally get out all of my ideas and stuff. So if you're interested in Mass Effect, I think this was a great talk. We have a lot of similar perspectives, a lot of different takes on things. I think it was a really productive conversation, and I am really happy with the podcast. So go ahead and check it out, and I'll chat after it's over. Well, welcome to my little podcast. I'll introduce you as N7 the Legend. You stream on Twitch. I've caught some of your streams, and they're really great. And you have the Mass Effect Lorecast that you are a co-host for. Kind of tell me about the stuff that you do and kind of who you are.
Sure. So first of all, I'm a huge Mass Effect fan, in case that wasn't evident. And I kind of found my way into podcasting and content creation in the pandemic. So I'm a huge Mass Effect fan. I found this guy who did all of these other video game lore casts. His name's Tom, aka Robots from the Robots Radio
prolific. That guy does everything.
Oh yeah, he's everywhere. If you listen to a video game podcast, you may have heard one of his. And so I became a huge fan of his Elder Scrolls Lorecast. I'm a big Elder Scrolls fan. And eventually I became a patron of it because I loved his content. I loved what he was doing. And I thought, he should be making a lot more money for this. And so then I appeared on one of his shows as like a patron. They have the patron chats at the end of the month. And eventually he and I got to talking, and I was like, hey, man, you don't have a Mass Effect show. And I want to do one. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I might go into that with you. Just give me some time to think about it. And this is around, this was around March, early March, late February 2021.
Oh,
so
wow.
Right before Legendary Edition came out.
Sure.
And
good timing.
It was perfect timing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came back to me and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we jumped headfirst into it. I had no idea how to write for a podcast, but we made the agreement that I was going to handle all the creative stuff. I was going to handle all the research, all of the notes and whatnot for our.
He'll show up,
shows. and then he was going to do all the production, and then people showed up. Yeah, like you said, people showed up out of nowhere, and we started, and I just kind of winged it. I have a background in journalism.
Okay.
So I think that helped a little bit in researching and compiling the media notes. But we started like that, and we were just doing one episode a week. And then eventually a lot of people who were listening to the Lorecast were like, hey, I want to watch you play Mass Effect. I want to be able to engage with you and ask you questions about these things. So I started streaming. And you have to understand that at that point, all I had to stream was an Xbox One. And
oh, wow.
And I was doing the podcast off of a 12-year-old MacBook Pro.
Okay.
with the cheapest mic I could get online.
Sure.
And so I was making it work, but barely. And then eventually the podcast within a few months just kind of exploded when Legendary Edition came out. And we found ourselves in the top 50 and in the top 25 video game podcasts in the country.
Wow.
And I was baffled by it because I was like, I'm just a huge Mass Effect nerd. I'm kind of surprised that other people like hearing me nerd out about this stuff.
Sure.
And then, fast forward, I became an affiliate with Twitch, and now I think Twitch told me I'm one of the top 25 Mass Effect streamers.
Nice.
And which is surprising to me. But
more people stream it than you think. Like it's not the biggest directory on earth, obviously, but it's not small either, especially all things considered.
Oh yeah, it's one of those narrative heavy games that people love to watch other people play because they love their playthrough. They want to see that joy from someone's first playthrough.
Or they
And so
want to tell
now,
you why you're wrong in yours.
oh, exactly. Yes, I've already dealt with that. Oh, why? Well, you're wrong for thinking the genophage was wrong, and a lot of other. I think I got into a brief argument about that in my last stream.
Sure.
Uh, but yeah, people are passionate about it, and now here I am, and thanks to the patrons of the podcast and the people who watch my stream, I was able to buy a gaming PC, and it's my first one ever. And so I stream from that now, did the podcast on that now, and it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So obviously people from my podcast and stuff who are going to listen to this probably mostly know my history, but I started basically getting into like build guides for the Division 1 when it came out in like 2017. And then I got really annoyed by people being really toxic in that community. So I decided to start streaming and doing that stuff because I wanted to be a more positive, person in that community. And then I started a podcast that was originally a Division podcast. And then Division 2 came out, and then it kind of came and went, and then it turned into this generic podcast. And now it's almost 200 episodes in, and I basically find a reason to talk about the Division and Mass Effect every week because it's just the way it is. But I try to cover gaming in general. But yeah, I always find something to talk about with those two games at this point. So I still try to kind of satisfy the OGs, but my first streaming setup was just, so I'm pretty sure let's see, I can't remember how it was. I had my phone in a dock so I could read chat. I was capturing the Xbox, the Xbox app on the PC.
Oh yeah,
where you can stream it.
yeah.
So I was using that as a capture card. I would have that window up, and I would have OBS capture that window, and then I would have all the display. It was wild. Like, it was such a hilarious, like, if one thing went wrong, the whole thing didn't work. It was just like held together by tape. And then over the years, obviously I have this nice computer over here now, and this, okay camera, and this a lighting setup. Like, it's dumb. Like, I always, whenever my wife walks into this third bedroom, it's always like, there's a bed and there's a dresser and it's like storage over here, and then my game throne. So it's cool. It's fun though. That's kind of the, I guess that's the fun part of all of this, is we're all just dudes sitting in our houses talking about games, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Mass Effect, so you're a giant Mass Effect fan, that's, kind of what got you into all this stuff. How did your journey with Mass Effect start? I'm assuming you're like an OG fan more so than myself. I'm new with the Legendary Edition, and I have some kind of fun quips about that, but I'll wait. So where did you start? Did you start with the first game, and kind of how did that go?
So it all started back in 2007. So you were right. I'm an OG Mass Effect fan, and I'm not that old either. For the listeners, I was only 14 when Mass Effect 1 came out.
That makes me feel very old. I was in college, so.
But in a way, I think 14 is the perfect age to start a new series. And so I was very receptive to it, and a lot of the sci-fi nuances were still new to me, so they weren't cliche at all. But I started in 2007 because, my room was in my mom's basement. So I was the stereotypical basement troll gamer. So my brother comes home, my older brother, one day, and he just slides this game across my table in my basement dwelling, and says, "Hey, I picked this up at GameStop. I thought you might like it. I don't really know what it's about. Didn't really give much mind to it." And it was Mass Effect 1. And, by that point, I don't think Mass Effect 1, it had just come out recently. It didn't really it didn't raise too many eyebrows, besides Fox News saying, "Oh, you can bang aliens."
Yeah, all the sex.
Right. And I don't...
No mention of all the violence and the murder and the gratuitous violence. But
Yeah.
there's a side boob, and it is good.
Yeah. Yeah, no mention of the intrigue, the betrayal, the seriously haunted themed. Yeah, no, I get it. And so I don't think my brother knew a damn thing about the game, but he slid it across the table to me. And that night, I stayed up all night just exploring the side planets and doing the side missions. And I was getting so lost in this game because as a kid, I just wanted to be an astronaut. Like, as you know, I looked at the stars with Marvel and I thought, what is out there? And then this game kind of helped me live out that astronaut fantasy of being able to like go to different, places in the galaxy and see these wonderful nebulas and star systems and clouds of astral dust, and it was just incredible. And so I got lost in it right away and like addicted to it. Like I read the codex entries, from like at 14. Like you can't get a 14-year-old to sit still, but I
To
was
read anything, yeah.
right. But I was like parsing the codex entries, just reading all of them. I couldn't get enough of it.
You didn't
And
read, you didn't do your Huckleberry Finn book report, but you knew every little bit of the Asari diplomatic, like, like levels of power.
oh yeah, yeah. I knew absolutely nothing about Nathaniel Hawthorne, but if you asked me about the Treaty of Phyrexian, I could tell you like all the ins and outs.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so I became addicted to it really quickly. And I guess I got to thank my older brother for
For
an action that he never
accidentally.
really thought too much of.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting for me was that, so in 2007, I was I would have either been a freshman or sophomore in college, and I would have recently began my job at GameStop. So the funny or maybe sad part of it is I'm fairly certain that through my 4 years in college and working at GameStop, I at least worked the midnight releases for Mass Effect 1 and 2. I think I was still working on like on call when 3 came out, and I'm fairly certain I worked the release for that as well. Never even thought twice about playing the games. Never even considered it. Didn't care. Was like, whatever, nerd space. I've got to play my Call of Duty, and I have got to play my Madden. I was that bro. I was like that broy gamer. But I worked. I could have rented it for free. I could have taken the disc home, played all I wanted, brought it back, took the second. Well, like it was just like the hindsight of it is so funny to me. So all I remember is I remember it being talked about, obviously, back in the day. And I remember like 6 years ago, just randomly getting on this YouTube algorithm wormhole of watching a bunch of the cinematics from the game and being like, oh, this is interesting, but this looks old as hell. Like this looks rough, and I am not playing that. And so I have a buddy at work who it's only he and I are. I work in an industry that's has very few men in it, and so I have this one other guy on my team, and we always talk about games. And he had been telling me for years, because we've worked together for 10 years now, and he had been telling me for years, like, hey, you need to play this game. It's very, very good. And I'm like, there's space powers, and I'm not a big medieval like magic kind of guy.
Yeah.
I like more.
Sci-fi.
Yeah. High fantasy is not my thing. I'm more of a sci-fi. He's like, dude, it's that. So then finally, the Legendary Edition gets announced. I'm like, okay, I'll play it, I guess. And then I'm on my 9th playthrough. So
It's amazing where the time goes, right?
yeah, and so that's where I've gone. So, and we'll get more into some of that, I guess. So, but I feel like it's a really important question that it seems like in the Mass Effect community is so important for people to know. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, this is a hot take. All right. And I know that there's going to be some kickback after this episode goes.
It's okay.
Someone's listening to it and says, "Oh, what the hell?" and throws a shoe at the radio.
It's Andromeda.
It's not Andromeda. I will say it's not Andromeda, but it is Mass Effect 1. So
Okay.
Mass Effect 1 is my favorite because I think, you having played through Legendary Edition a lot now, did you notice like a distinctive storytelling difference from 1 to 2?
Yeah, and and I'll let you finish. One thing that I'll point out now, because I'll forget if I don't talk about it. One thing that's interesting for me as a player that's played it all these years later is most game series, whether they're trilogies or sequels or whatever, span platform generations. And what I find so compelling about Mass Effect is that the first game is the most expansive and the least detailed, and then 2 gets more detailed but a little less expansive, and then 3 is not very expansive at all but extremely detailed, and that's all because it was on one platform. And so that doesn't really come to the story necessarily, but one thing that I did always find interesting about this game was that but that there is a distinct, like, the first game feels like this wide open space that anything could happen, anything could be out there, and then 2 feels a lot more focused, and then 3 feels really focused,
Yes.
which
The
makes sense. And
urgency,
it makes
the urgency
sense.
of 3 is
Sure.
just so,
But it
and
is
you
different. 100%.
oh yeah, you articulated it perfectly. It's like the first game is this wide open, starry-eyed and bushy-tailed universe where you're not sure what's going to happen. You have no idea what's around the corner. You really feel like you can go anywhere, do anything. And from a gameplay perspective, I loved it for that reason. And from a storytelling perspective, I feel like it also mirrored that. There was just around every corner, there was a new codex entry, there was a new dynamic or a new race that you just didn't know about. And I feel like they stopped expanding narrative wise in the games like that. And maybe that was a necessity because in the first of installation of a trilogy, you always have to have more exposition. Um, but I really enjoyed that. And then, like you said, in 2 and 3, the universe felt smaller. And that's by design. I know that. Um, but it also just it helps it, like, the whole expansiveness getting smaller with each iteration, it only serves to facilitate more playthroughs because when you finish 3 and you go back to 1, you're like, "Ah, thank I can breathe. There's no
Sure.
urgency, there's no dire
The
consequence.
pressure is very different.
Yeah. And
And it's
so I
because it's there in 3. Like, you feel, even if it's your 9th playthrough, you
yes.
still, it's just like, oh,
And the other thing is Mass Effect 1 is far more like high sci-fi. Whereas Mass Effect 2, I feel like they hired Michael Bay to direct that. And then Mass Effect 3 is this space rock opera, you know.
sure.
But and maybe like if you were to say there was a director of Mass Effect 3, if it were a movie, maybe it'd be Christopher Nolan.
Okay,
Um,
sure. Hmm.
but 1, I really liked it because it was this high sci-fi, like this is a game by nerds for nerds, and it didn't try to normalize or dumb down much. And I
Sure.
like that for the same reason that I like Morrowind, if you ever played Morrowind. It's really out there, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's totally alien and it's hard. You really have to get to love that game. But once you do, it's like you don't want to get ripped away from it. So yeah, I like Mass Effect 1 the best. Although I will concede that like Mass Effect Andromeda's combat and the gameplay, objectively, a lot smoother, glitches
Fair.
aside, combat was a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's always an interesting. So my favorite one. So many people say 2, and 2 is the one I dread playing the most, and that might be even more controversial. But like, I hate playing that game. I like the game. It's incredible. It's very good. The characters, top notch. Like, the story is fine. I don't love the collectors. I get what they were doing, but like, it's fine. They're fine. I think of course I'm gonna forget, the Cerberus kind of, getting them to be the boogeyman was cool, was fine in that, right? Especially being part of them, essentially. But I see so many people say 2, and I get it, like, because of the issues with 3 and because of the age, how aged 1 feels. Like, I understand why people say 2, but mine is probably 3 because I'm a big dum dum that just likes the thing to be thrown right in my face, and all the emotion and the big
Yeah, the
moments, and it
drama
just
is amazing.
so good. And So mine would probably be 3, but it's so funny. I always find myself, I play 1 and then I play 2 and I feel like I'm kind of slogging through it. I'm only doing the loyalty missions I need to with my little chart of who I need to be able to, do their thing. I do what I got to do and then I get through it. And then 3 happens, and I really enjoy it. I even enjoy the ending, and that's my biggest thing as a new player. I didn't experience the original endings. I didn't experience the last 10 years of even the revamped endings of all the controversy and arguing and all that. I just played it and I was like, oh, yeah, this one ending makes sense, which we'll talk about. I have some other questions that get into that. But for me, it's just the funny thing is, though, every time I finish 3, my first thought is like, I guess I'll start a new playthrough. Like 1 sure is like old, but then I start to play it and it's like the combat it's fun. And there's something about it. There's something about getting the explosive rounds and getting the armor and kind of how basic and kind of janky the skills and the powers are and stuff. There's just something, it's charming.
Yes.
Like and with the updates with the Legendary Edition, I will fully admit I've never played the original one. It sounds like they improved a lot of stuff gameplay wise.
Oh, yeah.
So like I never experienced that, but there's something charming about the first one, let alone the story and how epic it feels. And because it is, like you said, it's very open. It's very kind of almost whimsical. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's just very like awe-inspiring.
Yes.
But then it wraps up really well, like that final fight on the Citadel where you see, the Reaper in the background. He's doing like, that's so cool. Like it's just it's so epic, especially if you consider the time the game was made. And so like
it didn't try to punch above its weight class. You know what I mean? It didn't leave you on a cliffhanger ending either. It was a very self-contained story that was satisfying.
It could have ended right there. Sure.
Right. And it was just satisfying when it ended. And you were like, okay, I'm satisfied. But before you go on to an next point, I wanted to touch on Mass Effect 2. 110% agree with you there. It is a hot take that I've gotten a lot of flack for. Mass Effect 2 is not as good as people say it is. And a lot of people got brought onto the series when Mass Effect 2 came. So that was the first one that they played.
And so you can't blame them. Sure.
But honestly, my friends and I were just talking about this the other day. Like one of my oldest friends played Mass Effect 1 when it came out as well. And we were like, you know what? The whole Cerberus and Collector thing, it felt like just a departure from the main story. It felt like like a weird long expansion. And it was like, the Reapers are important, but guess what? We're going to focus on their like turd looking minions for a while.
God, those fights. I hate. The funny thing is for me is I like most of Mass Effect 2 besides anything to do with the collectors. Like I hate their missions. I hate, the final fight. It's just so, but like, so here's I guess where you can get at with my take on 2. My favorite parts of 2 are DLCs.
No, you're right.
I love the Shadow Broker DLC. It's so fun. And then Arrival. I think Arrival, even though it's not really that interesting from a gameplay perspective, it's not like it's whatever. But there's just something. It sets up 3 so well.
Oh, perfect.
And like, and even though the choices you make don't matter, and even though like it doesn't matter, it's so cool the way it really sets. It gives you that foreboding, like that, like, oh man, here they come kind of feeling before 3 even does. And I always love wrapping up my Mass Effect 2 playthroughs with that DLC because it just feels right. Like it just like, oh, this seems like this is messed up, man. Like,
that's definitely narrative wise. I feel like where we're supposed to play it because it leads perfectly into 3. Whereas if you don't play it and you just start 3, it feels kind of like, wait, what's going on? Like, just getting tossed in here. But
so I've always played it. If you don't play Arrival, don't they say that like an Alliance team basically did what you do?
Yeah. So this current playthrough I'm on, I forgot to play Arrival again. And it's killing me. It's the only playthrough I've never played Arrival. And so I got that entry in the war assets thing in Mass Effect 3. And it killed me. But besides the DLC, besides the collector missions, how long is Mass Effect 2? I mean, like, it's just a really long let's gather a team.
Fetch quest. It's
Yeah.
it's a giant fetch quest in a way. Sure.
In a way, yeah. And my friends and I were talking about that. It's like if you take away the recruitment, the team building aspect of that game, it is incredibly small,
Yeah.
very short.
Yeah.
And
And
I
so
don't
much of
know.
the side content is so whatever. Like the N7 missions and stuff are just like whatever, man. Like
Why would
I
they
don't
be
care.
right? There's no lore attached to them. The
Sure.
lore feels like the side plate that no one ordered on those
Hmm.
missions. Like the lore is the coleslaw.
Sure. Sure.
And
Yeah.
I just yeah, I get where you're saying. Whereas the side missions in Mass Effect 1, they felt like they were just part of the world. Like they were fleshed out, the story behind them made sense.
Hmm.
The ones in 2 are like, hey, there are these bad guys on this planet. Oh, what are they called? Oh yeah, they're Blue Suns.
Well, and it's so, and two is so rough because all of the side content feels so much like you need more XP to level up, and this is a mission that we can put your extra heavy ammo in, and like it just seems like it's there just to upgrade Shep rather than actually add to what's happening, and especially because like whenever I play one, I have this little printout I found on Reddit that like it's a list of all the missions and everything, and it obviously shows all the stuff you have to do, but then it also shows the side missions that do impact later in the game, and there's so many of those little red boxes. And then if you look at this, there's another tracker for 2 that's the same way, and I don't even use it because there's so few things that actually go forward and impact the third game. That yeah, it's funny. I understand why people like 2 so much. It makes complete sense to me. I just never grabbed onto it. Like for me, I would probably go. This is probably going to be controversial. I like 3 the most. 1 is right behind it. 2 and then Andromeda are pretty close because I don't hate Andromeda. I don't like it really, but I don't hate it either. And I don't think it's that much worse when it comes to actually like sitting down. Like when I sit down to play a playthrough of Andromeda, I think I've done 2 or 3 now. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. But because like you said about the gameplay and stuff of that game, it's actually kind of exciting. Whereas like I don't mind 2. I think there's a bunch of cool stuff in 2. I'm a big what's the word, tallymancer. I enjoy, like that's cool that she kind of becomes a more involved character in that way. So that's part of why I like 2. But I don't know, it's weird. So I'm glad that while we may not have the same favorite, I'm glad we both hate Mass Effect 2. That's what you've agreed to, and I will hear it now. But it's a fun conversation, and it's so funny how like even my buddy at work, after I played through all of them, the first question he had for me was, "Well, which one's your favorite?" Because he's a Mass Effect 2 guy through and through. He loves Mass Effect 2, and so and he actually really likes Andromeda. I think he likes Andromeda more than he likes 3. And maybe 1, which is cool. Like that's fine.
A controversial take.
Yeah, hey, he don't care. He's real into it. So when it comes to controversy, the Mass Effect 3 endings. So I guess I'll kind of throw in my 2 cents on it, in that I remember back in the day, like I remember because I was in like I cared about games. I was involved in games. I was just playing other games, but I remember hearing all the craziness, right? And a part of me remembers being like, nerds, what do you care? But like all these years later, I play through it, and I think my take on it is, especially when I've gone back and watched those original endings, and before the extended cut, I believe, right? Whew, I mean, it was like basically just a color palette change. Like I get it, like I understand. It's just my thing with, and I want to talk about the next game here in a little bit, but this will play into it. I don't think they could have ended that game in a way that would have made everyone happy. And so like when I think about it realistically, I think they did okay. not gonna say they did great. I'm not gonna say it's the best ending. There's only one ending I like personally, but I've seen people love all of them, and that's cool. Those freaks, but like, but I'm curious as someone who I assume played 3 when it came out. Did you play before the extended cut, the final?
I did.
Okay,
Yep.
so kind of like what do you remember of your initial feelings of it, and how do you kind of feel about it now?
Well, my initial feeling was pretty much like, that's it. You know, like that's it. It ended. I I don't know how many years I've put into this, how many hundreds of hours of gameplay, and like huge chapter of my life just closed. What the hell? And that's kind of how I felt about it, because I, like many other players, became really attached to my shepherd. I made all these choices that I felt very deeply and very strongly about, and shepherd was this avatar of myself in a way where I could be this spacefaring hero who never backed down from a challenge and always, stood up for what he believed was right. And it was ended in the blink of an eye with seemingly no resolution, no denouement, nothing like that. And I remember thinking, well, what do I do now? But it was even more because I'm a Game of Thrones fan, right? And we feel that a little bit. But it was still like, i I was insulted a little bit, because there's a difference, and I get what you're saying when you say that I don't think they could have ended it in a way to make everyone happy, but there's a difference between that and how they ended it originally.
Sure.
And and I totally get that. I don't know how they would have ended it, because this is a game series that was built on tracking your choices from one game to the next. And that was like revolutionary at the time. And not just that, but things turned out differently for different choices. And so when you have the compounding effects of hundreds and hundreds of different choices that you've made over hundreds of hours of gameplay across 3 games, how many thousands of permutations is that by the end? How do you really think that they're going to have time to write a unique ending for all thousands of those permutations? Now
Sure.
that's on one end of the spectrum. There's a difference between the thousands of permutations and
In
3
3.
and
Sure.
3 and And
Absolutely.
yeah. And so when they came out with the extended cut, I played it again. I just reloaded my save right before the ending, and then I did it.
Okay.
And I felt like that was a lot better, and I didn't understand why they didn't just do that from the beginning.
Sure.
Um, and I know for a lot of people at that point, it was like too little, too late.
It's too low. Sure. Sure.
But I like it, and now that I've played it, I've replayed it so many times since then. I accept the extended cut as canon, and like
Sure. Sure.
I and now I barely even remember what the original one was like. Uh,
What's your ending of choice personally?
my ending of choice is, drum roll, please. No, it's the destroy ending,
Sure.
because I felt like there's no way in hell that my shepherd has gone through all of this shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
You're fine. All
Um,
good.
gone through all of these things, and lost so many people that he cared about to this, Lovecraftian menace,
Sure.
uh, and is just gonna let, like, you get to the end, and now all of a
I'll
sudden,
become you.
right, right,
Like, sure.
no, like, and you get to the
Sure.
end, and it's like, then the catalyst basically says, "Well, thanks. Now you can help me accomplish my goal."
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to help you with your job. I'm I'm here to just end you. And I rejected the analysis that the catalyst gives you that, oh, if you kill us, the cycle will continue. That's speculative, and they don't know that.
And it's self-serving for them.
Right, of course. Like, if you are a true AI, then I have to expect that you're lying to me right now
Sure.
out of
Yeah.
self-preservation. And beyond that, would the AI consider what it was doing to beings to be more moral than giving them their own volition and free will to decide the future?
Because it thinks
And
on the lines of logic, not morality.
And if we're on the lines of logic, then clearly the catalyst is flawed, because the catalyst couldn't have predicted the outcome where Shepard gets to the beam.
Sure.
So, and if the catalyst can't predict that outcome, which it admits to, then there is the possibility that it doesn't know
It's
for
wrong.
certain that it's
Sure.
wrong.
Hmm.
So yeah,
No,
it's
I
circular logic.
so it's and that's where I land too. Like for me now, my reasonings are very self-serving. I think getting into this game so late and then getting so into it. I mean, I accept no ending other than destroy and shepherd takes that big breath.
Oh
I
yeah.
just and I understand I have questions that will dive more into that. But it's just for me, that's the only good ending
Yeah.
for me. I've seen people argue for synthesis and control and or even like bad destroy or whatever, but like for me, it's just what's interesting that the take I've had, and I even made a whole video about it, was talking about how, you have these type of games, like the Fallout games, especially like Fallout 3 or New Vegas, where that is your character. You are, because it's not a voice protagonist. In the end is kind of the end in those games. I have made the argument that Shepard isn't ours. Our experience with Shepard is ours, obviously, but that's BioWare's character. He had a history before us. He will probably have a future beyond us, maybe at least a legacy beyond us, I guess, is in that world. And so I've always felt like, and with games in general, I've made the argument a lot that a lot of gamers think that games are theirs. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that logic. But I guess like I'm a little bit older and I think of games as like an album that my favorite band is putting out. And they are going to make stylistic changes and decisions in that album that make them happy. So like when I play a game, I don't really think about them making the game for me. I think about them making the best game that they wanted to make. And so like, I guess for me, it's like this whole thing of, when it comes to these endings and all this stuff, like I don't really believe that the three endings were what they really wanted to do. Obviously the game got rushed out, it got delayed, it had, so I'm sure if they had another 2 years of development, we probably wouldn't have gotten those endings, right? Like I think that's a fair
No, like
expectation.
yeah, and that's what I was part of what I was touching on earlier when I said there was a distinct difference between 1 and 2.
Sure.
And that's when EA acquired BioWare.
Yeah.
And you could tell. You could really tell because it was no longer the days of the Knights of the Old Republic. It was
Sure.
EA. And speaking about, how Mass Effect 3 ended, I don't know if I would have wanted too much more. I'm not too entitled about it, but like even if at the end, like even with us picking Destroy, both you and I liking Destroy,
Mm-hmm.
if they could have ended with like my shepherd didn't necessarily need to live, but if they could have ended with the love interest like holding Shepard in their arms while
Like
Shepard
running up and finding them, or yeah, sure.
right, a dramatic, Hollywood last breath Shepard's like,
Wait,
said something.
you mean this isn't good enough for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
For audio listeners, I held up Shepard's name to the wall. But
yeah. No, that wasn't really, good enough for me. And besides, like, there was the implication that the love interest was going back to look for them anyway.
yeah, because in the Lives ending, yeah, they do the whole like, oh, I'm not gonna put it up, and then they kind of look up and do the whole, yeah, sure.
And so maybe I'm alone in this, and I've been told by listeners of my own podcast that I might be a bit of a masochist because I like meaningful tragedy in the
Mhm.
games. If everything's happy, it's boring to me. Give
Sure.
me the meaningful tragedy. I don't know if you've ever seen the scene in Mass Effect 3 where if you cannot convince the Quarians to stand down and they attack and they get wiped out,
It takes a header.
oh man,
Yeah.
that's hefty tragedy.
I will never see that ending, even though I will never see that scene, even though I appreciate the gravity of it. But it's and not to get too philosophical, but like it's like real life. If everything is good, then you don't know what good is, right? It's kind of that whole like if everything works out well, if you only know happiness, you don't actually know happiness, because you have to be sad to know what happy is, right? And so I think in games, that's like a kind of like a very compact version of that feeling of like, if a game only rewards you, if it only makes you happy, then you don't really, there's no depth, I guess, to that. Where like in Mass Effect, like in my playthrough so far, I've never gone, my current playthrough, I'm doing it where I'm going to save Morden. Rex took a header, unfortunately, even though he's like one of my favorite, like,
That's
because
what's
I
up.
want, yeah, I want to finally see myself play through where I can get Morden to live and stuff like that. And this time I'm gonna let the Quarians just demolish the Geth, and because I haven't done that, because I've always been so like, I want all the good stuff, but this time I'm finally like putting my foot down, being like, I need this to not be perfect for once.
Oh yeah, if you want to accentuate a playthrough like that, go for the tragic romance one where you romance Ashley or Caden in one, and then
Hmm.
you don't complete the romance because you sacrifice them on Vermeer.
Sure,
That's the meaningful tragedy.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
and yeah, but
So
that's I would have ended just Mass Effect 3 with one extra
just a
scene.
little more, yeah, sure, that's fine. So moving from that, I'll ask probably fairly briefly, but that's fine. Like, what was your, actually no, I'll say, what is your current take on Andromeda?
My current
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say my current take on Andromeda is it's a good game. I I think it's entertaining and it's well done. It's definitely a AAA game. I don't enjoy it as much as the original trilogy, and I sympathize with a lot of people who, they mean well when they say this, but they'll say it's not a Mass Effect game. And like I have to correct some listeners of my own podcast and say, look, just because you may not like it doesn't mean it's any less canon.
Sure,
It is a
sure.
Mass Effect game. And but I understand where they're coming from because it doesn't have the same caliber of writing.
Hmm?
It doesn't allow, I don't know. For me, when I've played through Andromeda and even back then and even now, it feels empty,
Yeah,
emotionless,
sure.
expressionless. It feels like, who are these people and why do I care about them? You know what I mean?
Here's a controversial quick take I'll throw at you. Do you think that game would have been better if we played as Alec?
It may have been. It may have been.
He was
I don't know.
interesting,
He,
and his
he's
kids aren't.
no, his kids have the personality of a wet napkin. Um,
Yeah, and he
and
was very compelling, in my opinion.
right, and I don't know how much of that is the voice actors' fault. Like, I don't know if any of it is actually. I really think that a lot of it is part of the writing because if you wanted to be a real jerk, like a real renegade in Mass Effect 1 through 3, you could.
Mhm.
You cannot really be a jerk that
You can
much
be
in.
kind of sassy,
Yeah, you can be like, oh, like snap,
sarcastic.
like
Hmm.
sassy,
Hmm.
sarcastic, but it's like it's not even like a dry wit. It's like a 14-year-old who thinks they're being funny.
Yeah, it's edgy. It's
Yeah,
like attempted edge. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's Andromeda for me is interesting because, obviously, I played through the Legendary came out. I played through it the first time. I played through my first time without any guides, no help. It was a massacre. It was awful. But it's the way I always tell people. I've had multiple friends since that game came out been like, hey, I never played Mass Effect and I know you really like it. Should I play it? I always say yes. And I always say, don't use any guides your first playthrough. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be a mess. You're probably going to be unhappy when it ends, but that's the way to play it the first time. And then I think you should go back and do your more ideal playthroughs. But
100%.
it's just, Andromeda to me is so interesting because I played through the first time. It was a shit show. So I played through one more time, the trilogy, so I could get my like good playthrough. Right. And then I'm like, I'm going to check out Andromeda. I don't want to play the trilogy again for the third time in like a month. I need to spread this out a little bit. So I'll check out Andromeda. And my first playthrough of Andromeda, I didn't romance anyone. I did no loyalty missions. I just played through the story. I buzzed right through it and I thought it sucked. I was not happy with it. I thought it was very mediocre. The combat that you mentioned, I always think it's interesting to point out to people. So I'm a big Division fan. In that game, with its ups and downs, has wildly good. Like if we could get a Mass Effect that has like the Division's cover system and gunplay and the way that they use skills in that game, oh my god, like it'd be so good. And Andromeda, I think people sometimes when they say, "Oh, its combat is so good," they're just talking about the jump jets and the skills or the powers, because those feel great. Those feel so good, and they look so good, and yeah, and the dodging and stuff like that. And because the cover system sucks in that game, is terrible.
Oh, it's awful.
And the gunplay is abysmal, is bad. But the powers feel so good to use. That those jump jets and the dodging are so fun. So like, yeah. So like Andromeda to me is so interesting because it's like, what I hate about it is when I fairly recently was reading about how after 3, their intention was to make a prequel of the First Contact War very shortly. There was this idea, and like I want that so bad. I think that'd be so cool. But then what's so interesting about Andromeda to me is that it's such an obvious sign that they are terrified to take that series forward, because and we can talk about it. It's the next thing I have coming up. So they're like, okay, we don't know what to do with the trilogy because we're gonna one day make another game that takes place after that, and there's 3 endings and people love their endings and all their choices, and that's gonna be hard as hell to do. So what if we went to a different galaxy?
Yeah.
600 years later, and we just completely, and so like I 100% understand why they did that. Like it from a just not wanting to hate their lives standpoint, I get it. Now the team currently is, gonna be talking. We'll get to there, but like Andromeda to me is so funny because I see people a lot say it's a good game, but it's just not a good Mass Effect game. I'm like, that just means it's not a very good Mass Effect game. Like it's fine. Like if it was called something else, maybe people would have received it better. But I mean, it's still a Mass Effect, and there is still a bunch of really cool stuff. Like I always tell people, you should at least play it once, and I always tell people do all the loyalty missions because some of those are fun. Some of them are great, and at least do one romance, because the romances I actually kind of like them. I think that they're cute. Maybe they aren't as deep, or like I have no Tally in that game. I have no individual in that game. I romance Cora, like that was, and she's fine. But I've only done one romance in that, and it was her, and I regret it because I think Vetra is actually a more interesting character there. But I don't hate Andromeda the way a lot of people do. I just hope that moving forward, Andromeda is a cautionary tale rather than inspiration. There's things, and the thing I say about Andromeda a lot is that what you saw from Andromeda was really weird because they both were trying to move the series into the next generation, because it was the first one that wasn't on the PS3 360, or PS3 360 era. And so they did a bunch of stuff where they were trying to make it a more modern game, right? And at the same time, they were basically trying to remake Mass Effect 1 in a lot of ways, which was great. Like there's a lot of that stuff that I think is really cool. It's just not executed. It didn't get the time. It apparently didn't have the people and the resources. Like there's all these breakdowns of what happened. But yeah, I don't hate Andromeda. I just hope that it was more of a lesson than anything as we kind of move forward.
I feel the same way. The other thing about Andromeda, though, that I didn't like from a gameplay perspective was that, and it wasn't, Andromeda's definitely not the only game that's guilty of this. It's been a game industry trend now for, I feel like, 10 years. Getting away in specifically in terms of role playing games, getting away from building your character and then having to stick with your build. But now it's all about fluid. You can be and do anything you want on the switch of a dime. No, come on, like make someone make a new character for that.
Sure.
That's where the replayability value comes in.
And that's so interesting because I've seen so many people say like, I hope in the next game we can change our classes and stuff on the fly again. And I get it because it is fun. It's I understand why someone who is just in there to just, but like my whole thing is like, I hope they do have jump jets in the next game, but I hope only certain classes have them.
Yeah,
I don't want everyone to have them, because there are some like hilarious moments in Andromeda where like people are jump jetting around like into walls and shit, like because it was just like kind of a messy game. But like, yeah, I completely agree. Because in my 2 playthroughs, I haven't switched at all. I've picked one path and I go down it. Because yeah, I agree. I think that it kind of takes some like soul away from it.
yeah, it cheapens the experience, I think.
Sure.
Because do you really value the class that you chose at all if you're just gonna change classes on a moment's notice? And it's
Sure.
like, I don't know. That was the other thing, and that trend, that fluidity of who you were as that person that you're role playing. Part of the value, in my opinion, from role playing games is making the role. And if you're making the role on the fly, then you don't really have a strong identity that you're grounded by, that
Sure.
you're, like if imagine an actor is acting in a play and the direction that they get from the director is basically do whatever.
Go for it.
just
Sure.
just do whatever you think fits the situation. Okay, well, am I guided by any narrative or
Not even show by show, but like scene by scene.
right?
Sure.
And that, I don't know, I guess as a stickler for the story, that doesn't seem too compelling to me.
Yeah,
And
that's fair.
so that's another reason why, ultimately I'm okay with Andromeda now, and I'll play it certainly for the stream. There's a lot of people that want to watch it.
Hmm.
But it's just it's certainly not my favorite Mass Effect, and it's not one of my preferred RPGs.
Sure. That's fair. So Andromeda comes out. I remember, so this was obviously before I played any of the games, and I remember my buddy at work was so excited. And he said he was such an Andromeda stan. He was that guy when it came out. Oh, it's not that buggy. It's not as bad as people say it is. It's actually pretty fun. I actually like the story. And then in more recent months and years, I've been like, he's like, I was just kind of telling myself. He's like, I was convincing myself it wasn't as bad. He's like, he still likes it, but he's calmed down a little bit. But like, so we had that. And I guess the last thing I will say is I will admit, I do think it's a shame that they didn't at least flesh that game out in the post-launch. It is a bummer, and especially in hindsight, that they dropped support for that to, drum roll, work on Anthem.
Oh,
Like, like as much as I will kind of dog on Andromeda, and especially like hyper Andromeda stands, I'm always happy to poke a little fun at them, because I think it's a bit much. It is, I think BioWare as a whole would have been better off making a couple Andromeda DLCs than making Anthem. Like,
definitely.
I find it hard to believe anyone who's being reasonable would disagree with that. Like Anthem really hurt BioWare and EA, and yeah, yeah. So what's funny about Anthem is I actually think it's actually been long enough. I don't think I have an NDA with them anymore. I played like an early alpha build of that game, and I remember from the first time I touched that game being like, oh no, this is not good. Like this game has no idea what it wants to be. It is so lost. It's trying to be everything, and it's not, doesn't feel like, I didn't even know BioWare games at the time, but like I could tell like this isn't what they make. I don't think. Like I'm pretty sure this isn't them. And yeah, that was an interesting, so yeah, rip Andromeda, I guess. But so we had those things happen, and then in 2020 the Game Awards come on, and I think this is when they announced the Legendary Edition. Because I was watching it and I was like, hey, my buddy wants me to play. I've heard this was coming. I'm going to buy that. And then that trailer ends, and then another trailer starts. So you have to appreciate, for me, we start flying, we see Andromeda and we dive away from it. This is the thing I've pointed out to people 100 times. We're diving away from it. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't fight me. But this is me pre-Mass Effect. I have no idea what's going on. We see a relay, and then there's this blue lady walking up a thing. And so at the time, I'm like, I have no idea what any of this means. But people were excited about it. What was your thoughts when you first saw that trailer for the next game?
Sheer excitement. Those are my feelings when I saw that. I think I saw that around Christmas, if I remember right. And I remember,
I think the Game Awards are like on the 21st or something, so it would have been.
Yeah, I was at my girlfriend's family's place for Christmas, and I was like, "Hold on, sorry, I gotta watch this video." And I was glued to my phone, and then I was like, basically telling anyone that would listen about it, and so I was really psyched.
Because that was pre-podcast, right? That was before you were doing the podcast.
Yeah, I suppose it was.
Yeah.
Or no. Actually, we had started the podcast.
Oh, okay.
So we had started the podcast, I believe. Yeah, that would have been December.
December 2020. Yeah, it would have been a few months before.
That was before the podcast. So, yeah, I was like psyched about it, but then like I analyzed it. And in fact, the first episode of the Mass Effect Lorecast is a complete like breakdown where we go over it.
Of course, yeah.
And the lingering question after that is Shepard alive? And so in that analysis, we tried to pinpoint exactly, given what we've seen in this trailer, when could the game be set?
Sure.
And so I think there's two possibilities. One, the game is set after Shepard's death. I think that's pretty evident. Now, as for how long afterward,
sure,
we're not sure, because of course it's Liara, and Asari can live up to 1,000
who could live, sure.
And putting it 800 years, putting it like 600 years after Shepard's death would be a convenient way to sidestep all of the continuity errors.
Which I have some strong feelings about that I will hold on.
But and this is by far the least popular speculation I've ever made. Not least popular in that people think that it's faulty logic, but that they're afraid of how accurate it could be.
Sure.
We're well aware that Liara is the one who recovered Shepard's body in the beginning of Mass Effect 2 when Shepard's dead. And it's from that icy planet called Alkera. That's where Shepard and the Normandy SR-1 enter orbit, and Shepard's body basically disintegrates. I think it's quite possible that the next Mass Effect does return to the Milky Way during the original trilogy, but Shepard has nothing to do with it because it's the 2 years where Shepard is dead.
It's like a prequel-ish.
It's a interquel. Yeah.
Sure.
And so honestly, I'm going to be dead honest with people. I don't want that. Want that. But I think that's quite possible because they have all of the framework there. You could have Liara working with Farron to, try to recover Shepard's body as part of this Cerberus plot.
Sure.
There's one plot line. You have another one with Garrus as Archangel and the betrayal that happens there. You could have another one with Tali. There's so many different squad mates that are very familiar.
Because they all kind of, sure.
And they went off and did their own thing. So it could be like an anthology series almost. And I personally, again, I would hate that.
Yeah.
But I think it's possible.
Sure.
The other alternative is that, like I said, it happens after Shepard's death. I'm saying that because there's so many different things in the trailer. Like you can see a dead Reaper body that's been confirmed by Mike Gamble to be a dead Reaper.
It's actually two.
2 dead Reapers.
Yeah. And people always point out the one in the background, but I'm always like, she's walking on one too, by the way.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
And you also see the destroyed Mass Effect relay, which of course happens after the end of Mass Effect 3. Those two things would seem to insinuate that is immediately following Mass Effect 3. But why would Shepard's chest plate be, or even
it's that like piece of the helmet, sure.
Helmet piece.
Why is it on this planet if he died on Earth?
Right. Why is it there?
Sure.
And so I think it could very well not be about Shepard at all. I think it could. There's also another possibility. They showed and referenced so many things from all of the Mass Effect games that have come out to date, even Andromeda, that what if the trailer was really just like hey, we're working on Mass
We're
Effect.
coming back. Sure.
Don't look too much into this. Like, maybe the trailer wasn't trying to show us anything about what the next game will be about. It was just a recap of what they've done.
Sure. And that's kind of where I've taken it. I've taken that trailer to be kind of, and this mostly comes from my experience of being involved with the Division devs and when they did some early trailers and stuff like that. Because I've even asked the guy who is a big wig on Division 2. He's now on their Star Wars game that they're making. And I even asked him, I'm like, how seriously should we take a trailer like this from 2020? It sounds like they're not even going to start production on this game until 2023 or maybe even 2024. He's like, there's almost no chance that when they made that trailer, they actually knew what the story was going to be yet. They probably had some very basic ideas, right? And he's like, look at the individual frames as them messaging specific things to you rather than trying to take something from the whole trailer. Yeah. And now he's a big Mass Effect fan too. So we've talked about this and he's like, I guess my possibilities are like the one thing I hate, the idea of a time jump to just hand wipe all the endings, it drives me wild. It would make me so angry to just be like, lazy. It's been so well. And this is where the funny thing is with all of Andromeda's issues, my biggest problem with Andromeda is that they're going to be forced to acknowledge it. I hate that. Not because there's anything wrong with the game. The game is fine, whatever. But it's the fact that since it exists, they have to acknowledge it in some capacity. Now, I have this really crazy idea of what, my ideal situation, I guess that's what I'll ask you is what your ideal. So we have all these possibilities. We have no idea. My ideal situation, and this is complete fanboyism, complete bias, is that the next game takes place after Mass Effect 3, that it's a rebuilding story. It doesn't take place that long after 3, maybe, even 10, 15, 20 years or something. I don't know. But that it's a rebuilding story in that, my God, I hope we don't have the Leviathans be the bad guys. I've seen people throw that out. I'm like, we don't need more cuttlefish. We don't we need. So my wild theory, and it's supported basically nothing, is that I think it would be really interesting if they set the game not very long after 3. The Andromeda missions are just basically beginning. Their ships are barely getting out of the Milky Way, right? But Gamble has at least insinuated that Andromeda isn't going to be ignored in this next game, right? So my thought is that the initiative, which I think is what they're called, right? Like the people, I know it's the Andromeda Initiative, but I guess I've always referred to them as the Initiative. Not all of them went. Like, they would have had hundreds of thousands of people potentially who had to build those ships and had to be involved in that mission. Well, not all of them could have gotten on the ships in my fan fiction-y head. And so what happened to the people who were left behind after the Reapers were killed off? Did they turtle up and hide and hope for the best? And so my thought would be, it'd be really interesting for me is if the next game has some kind of thing where everyone's recovering, the Citadel species are all trying to kind of get their crap back together. There's huge power vacuums. And what if the Initiative, or what's left of it, starts to try to help people? And there becomes this kind of weird conflict between the Initiative and the Citadel Council. Because Citadel Council won't deal with that. They won't deal with someone else trying to, grab power and stuff like that. That's been my super wild theory. My honest thing is that I think that they were making it very clear that Liara is involved, obviously. I think they were, and this is why I had kind of mentioned before, I don't think they can make this next game take everything into account. I just don't think they can. I think that game would take 20 years to make. And I bet it's not going to be 20 years from now. And so I think they were trying to message a few things, that Liara is going to be there. I think those Dead Reapers signifies the destroy ending. And the thing I've said a few times is I really believe that picking an ending and going hard narrowing the story down so that they can expand it again is going to be so much more interesting. Obviously, I'm biased if it's Destroy, than trying to incorporate all of the endings and just this next game starts so unfocused and then try to expand that again when the game was already kind of too big. I think it's more insulting to everyone if they do like a time jump or something to ignore it than it would be to pick one and go hard at it.
Yes.
And that's kind of been my big thing. So Liara Destroy ending probably taking place after 3. I mean, it seems like that's messaged. And my thing is that helmet shard makes no sense. There's no logical reason for that thing to exist, right? But I think they put themselves in a weird spot because the simple fact is that fragment is Shepard. Like that fragment is Shepard. And and no matter what it means, and it will eventually find out, right, here in 2 or 3 years, but they had to have known by putting that 2 seconds in that clip, and then her looking up and looking hopeful and looking, there's a bunch of people, including me, I'm gonna be totally honest, that are like, Shep better be there. He better be there. I don't think he will be. I'm not letting myself believe that. I think he'd be really cool. I think there's some cool possibilities there, but I don't know. I don't care. What I will say more than anything is that I don't care if they pick everything. I don't care if they make the synthesis ending, the canon, and they kill the Quarians and they make the Geth the gods of the universe. I don't care what they do. They can make every choice I hate, but if they do it well, I'll be fine with it. Like that's a big thing I've come to is that like I obviously have this ideal next game in my brain, just like every other player does. But they can make every choice I hate. But if they do it really, really good, that's fine. We don't want another Andromeda.
Yeah. And I agree. Now I have 2 kind of ideal next Mass Effect games in my head. If I'm being very self-indulgent,
go for it. That's what it's all about.
Then I want Shepard back. I want it to be post Mass Effect 3. Maybe they can write themselves out of having to canonize one of the blue, green, red endings. What if it really was just an illusion? Like the indoctrination theories.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that they have to canonize every part of the indoctrination theory. But what if it really was? There are so many different ways that they could take it with writing that wouldn't decanonize anyone's ending.
Sure.
But I want Shepard, as a self-indulgent ending, I want Shepard to be back. I want Shepard to be the playable character.
Yeah.
I want them to do make Shepard Master Chief.
Sure.
And when I say that, I mean make Shepard an icon of sci-fi gaming. Because that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah.
If they hadn't done Andromeda, if they had just come out with another Mass Effect game in 2017 and it was Shepard, I think we would have at least one other Mass Effect game since then.
Almost guaranteed.
Shepard again.
Yeah.
And Shepard would become paramount or tantamount to Master Chief level.
Sure.
And they could have done that. And I think a lot of people really would have liked that, but it would have been inherently different because Shepard has personality, whereas Master Chief doesn't really.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, a little bit, but not really.
Cortana has personality. Master Chief exists to interact with her. Yeah.
Right. And so, that would be my self-indulgent one. What I think I'd like more is it happens after Mass Effect 3. When you start the game, you import your Legendary Edition playthrough file. But you're not playing as Shepard again, but it just wanted to know your choices.
Sure.
And then it references those in seamless, lore-friendly, integrated ways with your new playable character, who's also an N7.
Sure.
New N7 grad, you reconstruct the profile.
You don't want to play as James? I've seen people say that.
I don't look after the recent scandals that Freddie Prinze Jr. has been embroiled in. I don't know if we're ever going to see.
Probably
James.
not. Yeah.
Not with BioWare. So I would love to play as a new N7. You start just like Mass Effect 1. You pick your profile reconstructed, your background, your psych profiles, and you just start your new Shepard with a new story. You know what I
But
mean?
they can sprinkle all that stuff in.
But
They can just go
still,
nuts. Sure.
yes, and they can
That's fair.
still integrate all your previous decisions where you basically created this setting for your new protagonist to live
And you
inside.
can be this rookie that the Alliance is sent off to work with Liara, and I mean, because they're obviously hinting to her being involved in stuff, and so that what that leads me to is to at least mention this last in 7 day with the poster, the last minute poster. I remember because this is after I've started playing these games. I'm making videos on my YouTube. I'm streaming it. I'm finally into it. N7 Day comes. I've heard about N7 Day for years, and the last N7 Day we got a trailer that I've watched 100 times. And then when that beat hits, when it looks at Liara's face, then I get chills. And I'm like, oh, this is coming. We're getting another one. Let's go. And the whole day comes. And I think they announced like a sale on the BioWare gear store. I think it was a bunch of like random stuff. And I remember being like, oh man, come on. And then the tweet. And then it comes and there's a poster. And then every single Mass Effect fan, especially creator, starts magnifying everything. So I'm just going to throw out what I saw.
Okay, go for it.
Obviously, everyone's seen the Geth. I mean, I actually kind of love that because then again, that to me says again, probably Destroy ending is being looked at pretty heavily if we're insinuating all these Geth are dead. But I don't hate the idea of maybe there's some more to that. And I think that they're obviously insinuating the Geth will have something to do with the next game.
And
I think that's
more to
pretty
that
obvious.
because what if the only Geth that were destroyed by that were the ones with Reaper code fragments?
Sure. And then we have that ship. And something I noticed about that ship is I saw everyone being like, that looks like an Andromeda ship. Like, I don't really think it does. But what it does look like is it's the SR1's color scheme.
It is.
And I think, and I never even noticed, like, I didn't even notice that the first, because I just think of the SR2 when I think of the Normandy. I don't know why, because the SR1's awesome. But like, I didn't until just recently. I was like, oh my God, that's the SR1. So that's like an old Alliance ship. What if this is post Mass Effect 3 and this is some old janky ship they had to pull out because everything else got freaking destroyed in the war? And then the last thing I noticed is, and I've looked at these 6 pixels for the last, so many months. I swear that one, I've seen people say they think it's like a Solarian, like all the little figures walking. That one, that's gotta be Rex, man. It just, why would they give us a red Krogan? I mean, it may not be. I know there's lots of Krogans that have that red battle armor. It's fine. But then one of those little figures, that sure looks like a red stripe on that helmet. That's all I'm saying. And now what you were saying is that maybe it's a rookie in 7 or something. Maybe it doesn't have to be Shep. But and then people got real funny with that poster, and that there's like, I saw people like changing the contrast of it and stuff. And there legitimately is on the left side, there's a very purposeful N7 in like the sand that if you change the contrast, you can see really easily. I mean, that little poster, like they're doing such a good job with these little teasers because they're not confirming anything. Oh, they are letting people's imaginations be their PR department, and it's really good. So what did you think when you saw that?
So I feel like I might be the anti-hype Mass Effect personality, if there is one.
Smart.
Because like I think you remember when the BioWare store made that typo and that faux pas, and then
I was the first one to make a video about that, and I know Mr. Holton got all the credit because he has like 80,000 subs, but I was the first one, and I was pretty deep into that.
I actually called out Mr. Holton because, and I didn't mention him by name, but I had just referenced what I viewed as extreme clickbait of a title. Mass Effect 4 details confirmed.
Yeah,
and it was like, come on, be reasonable. Basically, for all the listeners who weren't aware of what happened, the BioWare store had a poster, the same poster that we're referencing right now, the teaser one
from the N7 Day,
and there was some typical marketing copy beneath it, like as Shepard and the crew clean up the events of Mass Effect 3, or I forget how they phrased it.
It was very suggestive. It was weird. It was weird. Yeah. For how little we know, they were saying a lot.
It heavily implicated Shepard was back and alive to clean up after Mass Effect 3. Sure. But Working in journalism like I do, I understand the sheer volume of content that a lot of copywriters are tasked with making.
Sure.
And I knew that the BioWare store was run by people that don't work at BioWare.
It's the same company that does Bethesda store. And I
Yes.
think like 4 or 5 other big companies.
And so people need to understand that these are not gamers. These are not game developers that are writing this. These are marketers. Their job is to sell the product.
Sure.
And a lot of times they're given a stack of like 8, 10 products that they got to write blurbs for every day. And they don't know what they're going to get as an assignment. Who
Because it's the
knows if
same
they play
person
the
writing
game?
for the Bethesda store and the BioWare store, and they're just pumping stuff out. Sure.
Right. It is a content churn, and there's no, and it's not a prerequisite to get hired there that you've played the games. You know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
And
They
so,
might have looked up a Wikipedia page and been like, what's this? Okay.
right,
Yeah, that looks good.
right. I'm gonna research this. I'm gonna spend just enough time researching this that I'm not gonna hamper the stack of other content that I gotta get to in my
Sure.
to-do list. But I need to know just enough to make it seem like I know what I'm talking about. And that's where I thought that went immediately when I saw that BioWare store scandal.
Sure.
I was like, this was written by a marketing person who didn't really play the game. This was a faux pas. Like I knew it right away. And I came out with our episode that night, and I had criticized Mr. Holthen's title because it
Sure.
played as much as I want Shepard to come back.
Of
I
course.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't believe in misleading and lying to people.
It's
And
probably not going to be confirmed in a BioWare gear store listing.
right, like
Sure.
the sheer likelihood of the BioWare gear content marketing writer having inside developer knowledge and then leaking that onto their store,
Sure.
pun intended, the chances of that are astronomically low.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
And but yeah, but about that teaser poster itself,
Hmm.
like I was saying, I think I'm the anti-hype guy because you mentioned the ship. Yeah, it
Hmm.
has SR1 colors, but it also says SFX on it.
That
And
Mass Effect 1.
for
Yep.
those who don't know, that
Hmm.
SFX was a name placeholder for Mass Effect 1 because it stood for Science Fiction X.
Yeah. Like the most generic, like, and
Yeah,
if
it was,
have you ever seen the other names they proposed for Mass Effect?
oh
Like
yeah.
some of them they're just awful. Like I'm glad they landed where they did because a few of them were like, oh my God.
Yeah, a few of them were really cringe.
Hmm.
But you know, like you said, there were a couple things that I noticed. There are 5 things. One, crater that looks like an asteroid or ship or some large thing crashed into a planet. So immediately I'm thinking, is this the wreckage of the Normandy SR1? Or maybe
Hmm.
it's some of the Citadel's
Like
wreckage.
it's like
Goes
Mass
back
Effect
to, like,
Core or something.
yeah.
Sure.
And number 2, there's a corpse that's just not far from the crater. Who's, you know, I don't know whose corpse this is, but being the facetious detail digger that I am, I jokingly asked Jennifer Hale and Mark Meir on Twitter if it was them,
Mm,
but obviously they can't reveal kind of that,
sure.
even though it's true. But besides, when you zoom in, it kind of looks like a geth,
Yeah.
and when you zoom out, the whole thing looks like a geth, of course.
Sure.
And number 4, you know, a Krogan and a Sari, maybe Liara and a couple of other people. I'm not sure there.
I think it's very purposefully hard to tell. I think they are
Yeah.
very purposeful in this messaging.
And number 5, like I mentioned, you know, the ship, it has the letters SFX on it. It does kind of look like newer technology, so I get where people are coming from with the Andromeda like, but
Sure.
it's also possible we should keep this in mind. The ships in Mass Effect 1, the Normandy, as opposed to the Andromeda ship, the Tempest that we flew.
Hmm.
It not only was the Tempest arguably more advanced, but it was civilian. It wasn't
Sure.
military. And
Sure.
there's distinct differences in civilian and military architecture. So it's quite possible that that SFX ship we saw was just a civilian ship, but it
Sure.
wasn't any more advanced. And then there's also, you know, if I'm being the ultra anti-hype guy, the ship was a placeholder and means nothing.
Probably. Well, there's that old I know, so the little shot of Liara at the end of that 2020 trailer where she looks up and there's the people standing in the background and the ship, and there's an old concept art that people reference all the time that has an Angara standing in a similar thing. And that to me, I mean, that was from like 2018 or 2019. I'm like, that's 100% a placeholder thing. Like why would there's no potential next game that has Nangara and the Milky Way that makes any sense in my brain. But
It
who
would
knows?
take
I don't know.
some massive writing leaps. Yeah.
That would probably be upsetting. Now, the one thing I will add before I move on to the next thing is I did an interview that actually still hasn't come out yet, with someone who has interviewed the old BioWare gear store, not the current one, but the guy who ran it. And I guess during that conversation, and I don't believe this interview ever got released. I haven't heard that. This is all hearsay. That person, what they asked them, like, so what was up with that stupid poster, whatever. And I guess the response was, from their experience being the gear store before, they have no idea. It could be anything. Probably just a big mistake, like you were saying. But they were saying that none of those descriptions on those items don't get greenlit by someone at BioWare. BioWare greenlit that, at least in their experience, they had to have things approved. Now, did Mike Gamble approve that? Probably not. It may have went across his desk. An email may have come through. With the 3,000 other emails he probably gets a day, right? That he probably has never cared and will never care about some description for a gear store item. But the impression was that someone at BioWare, now could it be a PR person who doesn't know anything more about the game than the person who wrote it? Maybe. But their thought was that there's no way that someone went rogue completely and posted that without any direction. But it also doesn't mean that like Mike Gamble was like, I am going to mess with them. And now I do love, if you look at that item now, that description, they just nuked it.
Oh yeah.
It literally, it's like one line now. It's like, get your new poster. So I don't know. I think that was a fun thing to speculate about and have some fun with. But I do think the extremely definitive things I saw some people making content about was maybe a bit much. I understand where people are at right now, especially if you're trying to make this like a thing. If you aren't just doing it for fun, kind of like I am. Like I make videos that get like, if I get 100 views on a video, I'm super happy. These people are getting that a minute, right? And that's fine. But I also understand, especially with my Division history and other games, that this is just the way it's going to be until we have actual information. And that's fine to a point. But yeah, I think that trailer and that little teaser and whatever we get this year, I think it's going to be something really simple again this year. I think BioWare is obviously going to be repping Dragon Age hard for the next year, at least until it comes out. Probably, I think it sounds like late next year is a maybe. We'll see.
Definitely. And they don't want to release too soon to Starfield.
Yeah, they want that, because if that comes out early next year, maybe by the end of next year. Like I think next N7 Day 2023 may be kind of interesting. I think this year we may get like maybe Mike Gamble being like, hey, we're working hard. Here's some cool concept art. We're not confirming anything yet. Sorry. And that's, I think it's gonna be something. It'll be something cool. I think that poster was super cool. I think that was such a genius marketing move, because again, it's kind of like that trailer where it confirms nothing. It all could just be placeholder stuff. It could all just be for fun. I suspect the poster probably has a little more relevance than the trailer. But yeah, so let's see what's, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I will say, so with all of this, and like kind of what I said before about how like I don't really care what they do as long as they do it well, even though secretly I really want what I want to happen, which it sounds like you and I are kind of on a similar base.
Oh, definitely.
I will say whatever they do, that announcement of them bringing on Mary DeMarley onto that team makes me 100 times more confident than I was before. Not that I don't have faith in them. I think they are going to take this really seriously. I think they're going to try to do a good job with it. I loved that Guardians of the Galaxy game. I actually thought the gameplay kind of sucked. I didn't think it was that fun to play. It was just kind of, I don't know. It was fine, but I loved that story and the writing in it. And I remember I went multiple times when I was playing through it being like, oh, this like feels like a Mass Effect game, like what a modern Mass Effect game could kind of feel like. And when they announced her, that was so exciting. Because I think that's, obviously I'll let you respond, I promise. What I'm excited about with that is that she had an extremely long career at where she was. It was Square, or was it Square Enix, in Montreal. And she'd been there for a really long time. She just won Narrative of the Year at the Game Awards for Guardians. She didn't have to leave, I'm sure. Something tells me they didn't kick her out. And she's in Montreal, which I believe there's a studio for BioWare there as well. So she's been there for 15 plus years. So she knows everyone who works there. I'm sure all of those devs know each other, right? So she wouldn't have left this cushy job where she just had huge success to go to a game and a team and a developer that's in shambles. I think that's a move you only make if things are looking really good. And there's actually, did you play the Guardians game?
I did not.
So it's a very linear game. If you ever get a chance, if it's really cheap or something, I suggest at least checking it out. There's so Drax from the Guardians, the green guy. There is a part where you are doing his story, and there's a part where you're running through a dream sequence, and a little boy in black pants and a white hoodie runs across the screen like 3 times.
Oh, that's
None of the other characters mention it. No one references it. It just happens. And I posted it on the subreddit for Mass Effect, and people were like, what are you talking about? And then later on, I pointed out, I was like, look, at these times, there's a little boy that runs with the exact same animation across the screen. And so it's an obvious Mass Effect reference.
You think Mary's a big Mass Effect fan?
I think she is.
So
and I think, go ahead.
I would hope so. So I admittedly have not played the Guardians of the Galaxy game, have not played Deus Ex. So I'm not too familiar with their work. Yep. But from what I hear from everyone who has played those games is that those games' stories are amazing. And so I think what we can infer, if BioWare is taking on such a big name like Mary, is that they're diverting more of their funds toward the writing team, which I feel like any true Mass Effect fan should rejoice about.
Sure.
I think they realized with Andromeda that gameplay can only get you so far. And so I hope that it's a return to prioritizing the writing, prioritizing the storylines and the narratives of Mass Effect. I hope that's what that means. And God, I know that Drew Karpyshyn is off doing other things.
Man,
but
I know.
If the lore father could return in even like a consulting capacity for Mass Effect, because you have to understand for everyone that's listening, Drew Karpyshyn is kind of like the lore father of the game. Like, he made so much of the foundational lore of Mass Effect that I feel like for continuity's sake, you would have to consult him on a lot and be like, hey, would this make sense with this race that you helped create and whatnot? So yeah,
I've said that him being announced as coming back is the only thing that would probably get me more excited than her, because what's his face isn't coming back. He's doing his own studio. He came back. He consulted. I really didn't see him coming back and leaving as that bad of a thing. What that looked like to me was that they were probably in early pre-production. They wanted him to come back and consult and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Give us some, what do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And that's probably while he was setting up his studio. He was probably finding real estate. He was probably getting all of the stuff together while he was working with them, which I think is fine. I think that was, something tells me that was probably helpful. But the idea of him coming back and staying was probably kind of a pipe dream. But yeah, I've said that Drew coming back is the only thing that would probably get me more hyped than Mary. Because that was pretty unexpected, in my opinion, for her to move to them, especially after her recent success. But yeah, I'm slowly getting through the comics and the books, and all that with him, and it's just it's really it's very fun. It's very cool.
The books have that the Karpyshyn trilogy of books for Mass Effect have that Mass Effect 1 feeling of the story to them, and I love it.
Yeah. So the final thing I'll do before we kind of wrap up here is I see so many people talking about I don't think BioWare can recapture that magic. I don't think that they have the same, gusto or the same heart that they did back then. And I guess, my take is I don't think that they have to be old BioWare again, because I don't think they can be. That was a different generation of games. That was a different time. If you made Mass Effect 1 again today, it would get panned because, it's Mass Effect 1, right? And so I guess my thing is that, you know, are you someone who feels like they need to try to recapture something, or do how do you feel about that kind of concept?
Yeah, I think that they should focus on some of the elements that they had expertise in, some of the elements that kind of gave rise to their meteoric success. One of those being formatting a choose your own adventure book into a game form. I mean, that's essentially what they did with
Sure.
KOTOR and Dragon Age and Mass Effect, and that's why they gained their following. I think they should lean into that. That doesn't That's just a format thing though. That's not like you need to go back to the way you were. They can certainly be more modern in that presentation of that format. And so I do agree with you in terms of I don't think that they should try to be who they were. I think that they should return to the same format and proven success method that people really like. And I think as long as they do that with new writing, new characters, new content and new technological like leaps forward that
Mm-hmm.
they've made since then, I think as long as they do that, people will feel like this is the old BioWare. um, Much like how people want Bethesda to handle the next Fallout.
Sure.
um, they want them to go back to the basics, like, and I get that. um, and I think they can do that. But I swear, if the next Mass Effect game is an Andromeda sequel,
It'll be
I
hard to swallow.
it'll be hard to swallow. I will play it. I will
Sure.
play it.
Sure.
I'm not, I'll play it. I'll try to keep an open mind, but like they will really be, and no pun intended here, but they really will be alienating a
Yeah.
lot of their fans. Uh, they will, and you know what? And that's fine. They're a game studio. They're allowed to do whatever they want.
Sure.
Um, but again, I think that they should not listen to all the Twitter trolls who are like, you need to do this exactly how you did it before. Like,
Yeah.
let them be them. Just the only thing that I ask is, please give us good writing.
Sure.
Give us
Yeah.
good writing. That's all I ask.
Gunplay can suck. The cover system can suck again. Whatever. I don't care. But if you give me a compelling story, that's why I was said a couple times is you can say what if they canonize the control ending and all of the things that I personally don't care for. I will be able to handle that if the story blows my mind and if it's exciting and if it's meaningful and if I have choices that matter. And that's so important to me. Do you want them to bring back the Renegade Paragon system?
I kind of did like that. Uh, I kind of did like the Paragon Renegade system, and I did not like the Andromeda system of dialogue,
Yeah,
because again, like I hear people defend it and saying, "Well, it's more realistic. It's not like good and bad. There are different
sure.
things." But it also felt more bland and more like you couldn't be your own kind of like. Let me go to the extremes. If I want to go to the extremes, let me go to those extremes. And
It felt like Fallout 4 to me, where no
yeah,
matter what choices you made, you kind of ended up in the same place anyways.
right, right.
That's just how it played to me.
And you were never too heroic. You were never too villainous.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I want to be an ultra hero. I want to be
sure.
an ultra villain. If this is a game, let me live out my fantasies. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and so maybe I don't think that they should bring back the Paragon Renegade system as it was, but like,
some evolution
you
of
know what
it.
I mean? And speaking of
Sure.
Paragon Renegade, I had this idea with my friend the other day. How sweet would this have been if they adopted something like Fable had? where the more Paragon, more Renegade you were, the more it changed you. And I know that they
Sure.
did that with the scarring a little bit.
Hmm.
But what if you unlocked different decals for your ship or your armor?
Sure.
And like if you were pure Paragon, you unlocked a decal on the back of your armor that was like glowing angel wings, or you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
something
Sure.
like that. And gritty sci-fi style.
Or even like more, gruesome versions of your powers,
Right.
or or on the other side of things, more humane. I don't know, like a tranquilizer dart. If you're ultra paragon, maybe you don't kill every. I don't know, but no, I get it. That's for sure. That's cool. So I will wrap it up with one last question. What if you could pick one thing that would be guaranteed in the next game for you personally? This is you going full fanboy. This isn't for the community. This isn't for the franchise. This isn't for BioWare. This is for you. What's one thing that you would most like to have in the next game?
Give me sweet items. Give me like sweet, like typical RPG. Oh, you walked around this corner that looks pretty inconspicuous. There's a chest there. Oh my God, it's an amazing set of armor.
Hmm.
Yeah, I want that.
Okay,
That's just something that I love. Give
cool.
me let me play Mass Effect Fashion Simulator. Give me a
Oh yeah,
lot of different kinds of armor selections with different bonuses that look amazing. You know what I mean?
sure.
And like the different armor sets and make it fully customizable. And
One good thing for Andromeda, I will give them that. The aesthetic of Andromeda, that a lot of that armor
mhm,
and the customization of it, pretty cool.
yeah,
I
it
was a
was
pretty
pretty
big
awesome.
fan. Hmm.
I want them to go back to the Mass Effect 1 system of finding items themselves and having
Hmm.
like a bunch of different items that you then go and sell to
Sure,
merchants
sure.
and that kind of classic RPG system. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be
Yeah,
my my RPG fanboy coming out, that I want the items so that I can equip my squad with them too. You
sure.
remember after Mass Effect 1, you
Hmm.
couldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Let me equip my squad. Let me play Mass Effect Fashion Simulator. I need us to
sure.
match, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate your time. If people would like to follow you, check out your podcast, all of that, where's the best place for people to catch up with you?
Best place, you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at N7 The Legend. And on Twitch, I'm streaming 3 times a week sometimes. Those would be Saturdays for Mass Effect, Thursdays for Dragon Age. And if I got time on Mondays, I've been streaming some Witcher. And of course, if you want to catch the Mass Effect Lorecast, the podcast where we just dive really into the lore, not so much the news, but the lore, you can find that on pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. That's the Mass Effect Lorecast.
Awesome. Well, be sure to check them out. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for chatting with me.
Of course. Thanks, Bond. It's a pleasure.
Okay, and then that's the episode. So a big thanks again to N7 the Legend. Please go check him out and all of his content out, the Mass Effect Lorecast and so on and so forth, as well as his stream. Thank you so much for checking this out. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave comments, leave ratings, do all of that stuff. And that's all I have for this one. So until next time.